All right, well then let's go ahead and get started and jump in. Good afternoon, everyone. I am happy to welcome you to ICMA's webinar on problem solving through creative placemaking. My name is Goddeeris. I'm ICMA's Director of Survey Research, and we're just thrilled on behalf of this whole team here. I'm thrilled to have so many of you joining us virtually today. We do have a lot packed into our agenda, as some of you have heard me say already. So again, I'm going to get started right now. I'll say up front that we know everyone has spent far more time on Zoom this year than we probably all would have liked. So in recognition of that, we wanted to approach this webinar a little differently than your typical ICMA webinar. It's going to be a little less formal, hopefully a little less of a lecture, and probably a little faster paced. Since, or given the number of people that RSVP'd, we unfortunately won't be able to see or hear from all of you today, but you're welcome to use the chat if you'd like to let others know where you're zooming in from. And so long as the Zoom gods cooperate, you should at least be able to see and hear from this whole cast of characters. So aside from getting a peek into the new resource that we've just released today, I wanted to give you a sense of what to expect from this agenda. You're going to hear different perspectives on the value of creative placemaking strategies from people who've actually practiced this on the ground. And hopefully you're going to hear about how they can be used in somewhat unexpected ways. So we do aim to do all of this in less than an hour. If you have questions, you can use the chat function for that as well. You'll either mouse over the top or the bottom of your screen if you don't actually see that, and you can toggle that on and off. You'll want to select to send your messages to all panelists and all attendees so people can see your message. So time permitting, as we go through, one of us will try to respond to your questions via chat. If we don't have time to do that, we're going to keep a log of the questions, and we plan to create some sort of summary follow-up if needed. So anticipating one question that we usually get off the top, if you didn't hear, we are recording this, and we do plan to archive it and make the recording available at the guide's landing page shortly. So at this point, I'm very pleased to recognize ICMA's Executive Director, Marc Ott, who shares a bit of his personal journey in the foreword to this guide. So again, Marc, thank you for that and for being here with us today to celebrate the resource. So the mic is yours.
Well, thank you, Laura. It is really a pleasure to be here today to talk about creative placemaking, and to really, I just want to begin by acknowledging all of you. And Laura, I'm talking about you and Lindsay and the outreach team and just everybody that's been involved in this. I know you guys have worked for a long time, I think the better part of a year, if not a year, on putting this guide together. And of course, there's always a funding issue when we're trying to do something, and there was in this case. And so I want to also acknowledge the ArtPlace America, and specifically Lyz Crane, for not just the funding, but for believing in the vision of the guide, which I think is really important. And I have to tell you, if I didn't say it to you, Laura and Lindsay, when you all asked me, I was honored by it, quite frankly. And I will tell you that the conversation we had that day, even though my journey in this profession and sort of my quiet hobby with respect to art has obviously pursued the journey for a long time, but that the journey with art has always been something quiet. And for most of my career, nobody knew, and it was only so many years ago when I began to realize how my life experience in general and the art that I quietly did, oftentimes more people than other things, and my work, at some point I began to realize the convergence between all of those things, and that the way that I approached my art and how I looked at things, the observation of things, and how I saw all kinds of connections. And when I walked away and came back and looked again, I saw even more, and then I began to realize the same thing was true with respect to work, right? And that, the more I looked, the more I saw opportunities to connect things. Sometimes things that other people would think would be unorthodox to make those kinds of connections, but you make them and you stand back and look, and sometimes you see something. And what you see may be that thing that solves a problem, that elevates you above and beyond something that seemed insurmountable to people before, right? And I find that other people make those kinds of connections too and come up with creative solutions. And I found that in the course of my journey as a city manager. I noted in the forward, I found it in places like with public works crews when they were out in the field, in the street, working on a project that didn't have all of the things that they needed. They came up with the most amazing solutions, right? That were creative and artful in what they did to get what they needed to accomplish that day done. And when I think about the range of issues today, right? Whether we're talking about, the technology and the rate of change, whether we're talking about, social and racial justice and equity, and all that we have seen today, I think that these things will demand of us, will require us, right, to broaden our focus and be prepared to make, connections that we might not have thought to make before. And I think it's so powerful. And when I think about that, and I try to look past where we are today, I realize that really just about anything is possible, even the things that seem more perplexing to us right now in the moment. That through art and artful eyes and vision, that there are opportunities to come together and solve those differences and create spaces where people can feel safe and collaborate. And so, it reminds me of when I first went to Austin and thinking about my journey in the profession, but also the art. And some of you may not know this, but City Hall in Austin also serves as an art gallery. Which is, for me, a guy like me, was absolutely, amazing. But it also, the fact that all of that art is there, and it's all over on all 4 floors, and they had an annual, opening, with the new exhibits every year. The city of Austin made an acquisition every year, but more than that, it created this space and this energy that was something really different, from the kind of bureaucratic institutional feel that you often get when you go into a public building like that. This wasn't like that. This invited, creativity of thought and conversation and opportunity and connections. Now, some would say that's why the sausage making in Austin was so difficult and complex. But the fact of the matter is that spirit existed, in local government there. And, Austin obviously was recognized for innovations and a variety of things, and creating space and opportunity for people to ideate and create. They're known for that. And so I think that this has great applicability within our local government profession. And I think the guide that you all put together is going to really serve that purpose and help our members really think beyond where they are and recognize that there are all kinds of connections yet to be made creatively. So I'm pleased to be here. I'm proud of the work that all of you have done to make this guide possible. And again, thank our supporter and funder in all of this, ArtPlace America. So with that, Laura, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Mark. The words really mean a lot coming from you, and I want to echo your thanks, of course, to ArtPlace America, and also note that I hope you and everyone else will hear some echoes of some of the things you mentioned in the stories that we're going to feature later in this conversation. But again, for now, I really want to echo the thanks to ArtPlace and turn it over to welcome ArtPlace's Deputy Director, Lyz Crane, who has been this project's true champion. And I know that ICMA is not the only entity on today's call that owes a lot of gratitude to Lyz and the whole team at ArtPlace. So great to see you, Lyz. Hand it to you.
Thank you, Laura. It's so kind. And Mark, thank you so much for your incredible words. What a great way to get us started. I feel like you've really captured a lot of the essence of what we were working to convey here. For those of you who don't know, ArtPlace is a 10-year initiative that's been working to enlist artists as allies in equitable community planning and development. And it's been so incredible to have the opportunity to work with Lindsay and Laura and the whole ICMA crew, our advisors, Civic Arts, to help produce this guide. My grandfather was actually a city manager, worked all over the country from Boulder, Colorado, Superior, Wisconsin, Evanston, Illinois, Castleton, Vermont, a whole bunch of places all over the country. And later in life, my grandmother was actually the mayor of Hilton Head, South Carolina. So I feel like I have this like local government, city, county, local manager thing in my bones. So it was just such an honor to be able to actually work on this project together. We wanted to partner with ICMA and our friends at Civic Arts to produce this guide because we think there's a really critical opportunity to reimagine how local government does its work. We believe that artists, culture bearers, designers have a critical role to play in helping to achieve equitable, healthy, and sustainable communities. And sometimes this role is tackling issues and challenges around infrastructure, public space, health, safety, housing, transportation, all the things that I think city managers wake up and county managers wake up every day thinking about. That. But then also I think within this, it's also often about how people come together, how communities build power, who belongs in communities, what happens in our public spaces, how that makes people feel, how we're building the connective tissue that forms the backbone of resiliency, especially in times like today, and really how we're looking at our current systems perpetuate racial injustice and unequal access and benefit from local government decision making. So there's ways in which this is both really about tackling the major issues in communities, and it's also a way about transforming practice. So we can't do this kind of work in place without local government managers having vision, stewarding these projects, saying yes when something a little bit different comes through the door. So you all are really critical to this process. And ArtPlace has been a 10-year initiative, and we're actually sunsetting in just 2 short weeks at the end of December. So I'm doubly excited to actually have organizations like ICMA and Civic Arts to continue to carry on this torch and being resources for you all in this conversation long after we're gone very soon. So thank you all for being here. I can't wait for you to dive into this guide, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Liz, for that very quick introduction to ArtPlace, and again for being such an amazing influence and partner in this project. I also wanted to take a moment to recognize a number of individuals, including myself. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Lindsay Jacques, and I am with ICMA, the Senior Research Associate who's been working on this guide. So who I really wanted to recognize was a number of individuals on this call that helped in the making of this guide as part of an advisory team. They served as navigators to make sure the content was accurate, applicable to the local government audience, and most importantly, actionable. This group was full of different perspectives from local government professionals such as city and county managers to the civically engaged artists who are doing this work across the United States in both large and small communities. So I thank you guys for the support you've provided to this project and for joining us today. And I don't have time to name you all, and I'm not sure who's here, but thank you for being here and thank you for your support. At this point, I would like to recognize that some of you may not be familiar with the term creative placemaking, or it may mean something different to you. To us, creative placemaking is the intentional integration of arts, culture, and community-engaged strategies into the process of equitable community planning and development. Initially, you may be thinking of creative placemaking as the wayfinding elements in your downtown, or the mural painted on the side of a prominent building, or the colored and protected bike lanes that go throughout your community. While these things may be products of creative placemaking, what truly makes it a creative placemaking project is the process through which these things are created, and that process is centered in equity and is community engaged and community created. The arts can do so much more than beautify a place, as I've learned over this past year. Artists and culture bearers can facilitate processes that amplify residents' voices and experiences, build trust and enable collaboration across disciplines and sectors, reveal fresh perspectives on persistent challenges, activate community assets, foster a stronger social fabric, on and on and on. In short, to say that creative placemaking is a compelling approach to complex problems facing city and county managers and communities today. During this hour, we hope to challenge and expand your concept of what role arts and culture can play in your decision-making processes and how integrating them upstream can have significant and meaningful impacts on your outcomes, your organization, and your community as a whole. So to transition, we've invited two of our characters featured in the guide to help begin expanding your definition. Commissioner Michael Sauschuck currently oversees the state of Maine's public safety bureaus, but formerly served as the assistant city manager and the police chief in the city of Portland, Maine. Before he was assistant city manager or police chief, when he was just a lieutenant, he met Marty Pottenger, a theater artist, playwright, activist, and executive and artistic director of Art at Work. I'll go ahead and pass things over to Mike to help fill in some of the blanks of this story and properly tell it. Mike, you have the mic.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lindsay. It really is an honor and a privilege to be here today. Mark and your team, thank you very much for having us. This is a big deal. It means a lot to us, to say the least, and to the members of the association. We truly appreciate what you do on behalf of your communities, your cities, your counties, whatever that entity may be. As Lindsay had mentioned, I spent 7 years as a police chief in Portland. I was the interim city manager for a while as we were searching for a new city manager, and ultimately retired from the police department to go and be an assistant city manager for a while before coming up here to the state of Maine. So I love this entire process. I love your roles in your communities. And you mean a lot to all of us. So again, thanks for having us. So this is, when we start talking about art, we talk about creative placemaking, the intentional aspects of that. Like many of you, I've seen in my careers that really the cornerstone of what we do, the actual bedrock of what we do day in and day out, all starts with trust in relationships. Having trust with those we serve, those that serve with us, in turn allow us to develop the relationships that are so incredibly important for us to accomplish the mission in our communities. Without that trust, without those relationships, we truly are sitting on the 4th floor of a police department or at City Hall. We turn into entities rather than the people that are so important to actually get out there and get the work done. And in order to build that trust, I think it's incredibly important to break away from the titles, and in my case, for decades of my career, uniforms and shiny boots, and he's a police officer. I am absolutely proud of that, as a matter of fact. I also happen to be Mike, and when I have conversations with people, whether they're in the living room at 2 a.m. or during a council meeting, that's who I'm speaking as. I fully understand the positions that I've held and what that means in a broader sense. But if we can, in fact, break down those barriers and get down to the human beings we are, that's how you start building that trust. And there's no more important role, certainly in 2020, for law enforcement, as an example, than that trust and relationships. And as cops, we burnt a lot of bridges for a long, long time. And it's up to us to work with our partners to redevelop that trust in our communities. And there's a piece of that trust that's part of the Portland, Maine story, to say the least. We ultimately worked through a couple of poetry, photography programs, calendars. We were involved with a couple of plays with my good friend and partner, Marty Pottenger. And for us, I'll be the first to admit, when I found out about this, I was really a junior lieutenant, and the command staff was like, "Hey, Mike, we want you to head up this thing." And I was horrified. I'm like, "Well, you want me to go into the police department and get cops to do poetry? Like, what did I do wrong? What happened? Why am I the guy that you're throwing to the wolves?" And I even mentioned in the first meeting with Marty, with a room full of amazing artists, I said, I'd rather go outside right now in front of the police department and fight for people than write a poem and go out in public and read it. And one of the poets said, looked at me and had a great look on his face, and he goes, yeah, I get it. He said, poetry's hard. It's scary. I do this for a living. It's a big deal. And from there, we had an amazing, amazing time. The professional and, more importantly to me, to a certain extent, the personal growth that I experienced in these projects really helped me and continue to help me to this day in my various roles, now with the state of Maine. I think about impacts. I thought it was going to be a hard sell. It was so easy to talk to police officers, and ultimately, as Marc had mentioned in some of his experience with the arts, we found out a lot of new things about people that I worked with every day. I happen to be a photographer. I do poetry on the side. It's stuff I didn't know and I didn't understand until we really started to dig in. And the impact that it had with our relationships in the community, to this day, I hear positive things about that calendar project in the city of Portland. And for me, it really was able to break down some of those barriers. It was able to build morale within the police department. When I hear chiefs from around the country, after a bad thing happened, and you can fill in the blank on what that may be, I hear too many cops standing at podiums saying, we're gonna build relationships. We're gonna start a group. We're gonna do this. And my answer is always, if you had done that 5 years ago, you probably wouldn't be in the position you're in right now. So yeah, you have to get out there. Let's do that. But the sooner we do that, the better. And the more often we make that a central piece for us, the better. So I've had law enforcement officers from really all over the world when we rolled this thing out. It was pretty amazing. Reach out and have some of those very, very similar conversations. And we saw an immediate impact with the relationships with people of color in the city of Portland. The play itself, I'll speak to that for a second. I was the chief at the time. Classic. Go in for their very first practice and their auditions, right? And as they're doing the workup to the actual play. And I'm just sitting in the back of the room, and you've got cops over here and you got kids over there, right? You just know it, you can see it. And then I had an opportunity to come back and see those performances. And it was like they were family, cutting up on each other and having a good time and stealing a cop's hat and putting it on and just really rolling with the entire atmosphere. Because now there was a comfort level, there was a relationship where we could get beyond all of the fluff that you see, all the pain that you see, the trauma that you see, and let's start working together to make progress and ultimately accomplish that mission, whatever that mission happens to be for you and your various worlds. So I'm going to stop there only because we've only got about 15 minutes. It's a very powerful meeting, and I don't want to talk too long. Marty Pottenger is an amazing partner. She's a force of nature. She's really the backbone of these projects, and I'm proud to call her a friend. So Marty, if you want to pick up the ball from there.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for this. Thanks for that. And thanks, ICMA, Lindsay and Laura and your crews, Marc. I've always thought of ICMA as a high bar, the kind of like my highest bar, my gold star. And so to actually be here now today on Zoom with your membership and your support is a huge thing for me. I always say, aim for the highest bar you can possibly imagine and fail as close to that bar as you can. As municipal workers have known, probably forever, local governments have always been targets for grievances, criticism, stereotyping, disappointment, and distrust. And in these times of increasing tension, this is spiraling out of reach, and you all know it firsthand. Art at Works, that's the organization I run. Initially, it was Arts and Equity Initiative. Its primary focus, and I just wanted to make this distinction, has been bringing creative engagement to the municipal workers and within municipal government, as opposed to anchoring it in the community. So it is about our relationships with the municipal government and each other and departments and interdepartment and relationship with the community, but it starts kind of local government. So right off the top, I'll just want to thank Joe Gray, who was the city manager back in 2007, who welcomed me onto his staff so he could ensure that the artists' calls would be answered. I think this is a great time to ask the question, what can we do to build and rebuild our relationships with the communities that we serve? And what can we do to offer the dedicated staff of public servants and employees who are all frontline workers at this point, the support, working conditions, and attention they need and deserve? I watched, just in the 7 to 8 years I was at the city of Portland, I watched the tempers raise and the city workers got increasingly targeted by frustrated, it's like the mom and dad of everything, right? And so that was a real concern. And this work had a real role to play in contradicting that and shifting how people looked at it. So it's bringing creativity to how the work gets done, to those doing the work and to those we serve. It's a powerful, it's cost effective, and it's sustainable, and it's a game changer. To various degrees. I wanted to just, you all were being asked to multitask a little bit when Mike was saying his moving and descriptions, but historic police, low police morale in a police department is a very expensive problem. It's a painful and hard on the officers themselves. It challenges issues around substance abuse and personal problems at home and with oneself, and struggles which we all have anyway, and also then with the community, and strains those relationships. So I'll say more about evaluation towards the end, but you saw those slides, which were about Thin Blue Lines, which was a police poetry and photography calendar that we did for 2 years. Each year was to honor an officer who tragically died that year. So it was in part an opportunity to raise money, and as well as raise spirits, and as well as build relationships with the community. And like Mike just sweetly pointed out, within the officers themselves. I'm gonna hop because of time to Forest City Times, which Lindsay is doing a great job womaning the slide projector there. In 2010, David Okada, a Sudanese refugee who came when he was young and a Portlander, was armed and ended up being shot and killed by the Portland police. Young people in the weeks that followed, there was escalating rocks and bottles being thrown at officers on duty and patrol cars, and it spread like wildfire. It was a lesson in something, which now we've all seen. And now with this impressive and necessary movement for challenging racism and white supremacy for racial and creating racial justice, at the time, the police chief, who was James Craig then, called and asked in response to this if I would do a play, which seemed to me like far too high a bar for municipal workers, but that was his request. We had a very direct, to say the least, conversation where I explained that art at work was intention and reason was to be transformative, not to be public relations. That every department had teddy bears and every department had officers who were more likely to cross a line, was how I put it at the time. And that I would need to work with those officers if I was going to put our resources to work on this. And he didn't agree easily, but he ended up agreeing. And so we did created this play called Radio Calls with 5 very brave officers. And in order to really, designing of these workshops is where you really get to use your imagination, but also really think as high and broad and deep as you can about what's possible. And so I was able to co-commission a group to organize, ended up being 9 African-born high school students who were Portlanders now, to do a play about their relationship to the police called The Weeping City. Mike referred to it. And so they had their own independent play. I wasn't at rehearsals. I didn't help write the script. Another group that they knew worked with them. And so then those 2 plays were performed side by side, one after the other, at our 3 high schools and at the public library. And over 1,000 students, high school students and adults, ended up getting to see it. The impacts are really important. That is kind of the point of the work. And often the impacts in this kind of work come through the process, which is just a matter of kind of, it's like a family, right? It happens as you're moving in a direction. But here are some of the impacts on the slide. I wanted to say, if you could be there, if you've been at a theater performance where everyone's breathing together and no one's breathing at the same time, that's kind of the feeling of those performances in the high schools. This is a Casco Bay High School. There was a really engaged question and answer after every performance, a high percentage of written evaluations, which we all know is a good sign. And students just flocked afterwards. Mike got to see this, to talk to the officers in particular after the show. And there's all these wonderful photos on our website about this project where people are in these engaged conversations. And one of the things that meant a lot to me was officers reported young people, African heritage, not Irish, Italian, longtime Mainers, would come up to them on the street and say, "Oh, my cousin said he saw this show. Were you in it?" Or, "I saw the show. I saw you." And that officer wasn't in the show. And to me, the concept of raising expectations, both it put officers in a different place of actually getting to figure out how to deal with that, right? And how to build those relationships and kind of unexpectedly. And it also said a lot that the young people were coming up and felt like a door had been opened. I think this one is our curtain call. It's our final curtain call after the performance. And it was certainly the most evident time of smiles, which Mike also referenced. I will say that in the evaluation part of this, after this performance, everyone assured me and had really good reasons why they couldn't come to an evaluation. And I knew how important that was for us to gather after something this intense and this, huge, and let people be appreciated and let them notice what they did and let them talk about what it was like for them. So I swear to God, every student and every officer had brilliant and believable reasons why they couldn't come, but I knew enough at that point to schedule it anyway. They all came. Nobody left for 2 hours. Some officers had worked graveyard shifts and hadn't slept in over 18, 20 hours. And people said it changed their lives. And they had no idea that that was what was going to happen. Afterwards, one more impact was Rafiq, one of the Somali performers and students, organized on his own three meetings, one with the Portland Police and the Somali community leadership, one with the state police and the Somali community leadership, and one with ICE, the federal police. So he just decided this needed to happen and he did it. So you can't predict all this, and it's actually hard to track. I always use as an example, how do you prove to a city that they just saved $350,000 and only paid $35,000 because they didn't get 3 more lawsuits? They didn't completely crash and wreck their relationship with one community. They didn't, just this kind of things. And that is really a part of the work, is figuring out how do you case make something when in large part what you're doing is you're building strength that actually is preventing, troubling things from happening. I wanted to say, I'm just checking time here. I think we're still doing, we're close. Because Mike's here, because the work was so exciting to get to work with the police, because there's such a definitive issue right now. But the work of Art at Work, these were 3 of 15 projects we did on those 8 years with the city. And it included having a city hall gallery, which was the big room before everyone went through, before they came to any city hall meetings, where council chambers was. And it was filled with artwork by city workers, beautifully displayed, well lit, maps of the community that showed Portland for what it really was, poetry, graphics, tributes, and the calendars and stories. And so that the community saw it, it just was like this lovely contradiction as you went in to try to work together as a community. And other groups were dealing with a barrage of racism, racial discrimination lawsuits in Public Works Department. And we had a series of workshops where a wide selection of public works workers almost entirely identifying as white, actually got to work through story to reclaim their actual ethnic heritage as Italian, as Russian, as Irish, as Franco. And then they made prints, beautiful prints that hung around the city and in their workplaces to remind them of who they actually were. So I want to say before leaving, signing off for everybody else, that not everybody gets to work with somebody like Mike, but without him, without a leader, a risk taker, someone confident enough to engage in an unproven methodology that takes municipal workers way outside of their comfort zone. And we could try the next slide if you have it. These people are often, oh, that's Portland. There we go. Here's Mike. The people you look for, these people I just described, risk taker leaders, the way I find them, they're often not elected officials. They're not presidents or CEOs of anything. They're often not leaders in neighborhood associations. They are the people that others know to seek out when they need help. So I usually start my projects with figuring out what community we're talking about, if it's the Public Works Department or West End, and asking the people one by one, informally, who do you go to when you have a problem? Who do you go to when you need help with something? And then those are the names that I gather, and those are the people that I reach out to. Both, they know when to tell me I need to apologize. They know when to tip me off that I'm heading in a less useful direction. They know me. They can tell me to slow down, to speed up, to shut up. And sometimes their name, Mike Sauschuck. There you go. So thank goodness your community, all of you that are listening to this kind of Zoom radio broadcast. And thank goodness your community, I know for a fact, is full of these people. And it's also full of brilliant, bold artists who are willing to learn as well as teach. And it's full of leaders confident enough to take a risk, putting creativity in the toolbox. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Marty and Mike, for sharing your inspiring and incredible work with us. And I know you've piqued my interest on exploring more of how these strategies can play out in different contexts within local government and the difference that they can make. You can find Art at Work, Marty and Mike featured within the guide, so be sure to open it up and see kind of the different things that Marty was teasing. She did work in so many other departments, and it's really, really incredible. So thank you very much. Next, I'm happy to introduce the incredible leader, Norton Bonaparte Jr., City Manager of Sanford, Florida. Norton has served as an advisor for this project over the last year, and will share with you some of his own reflections and understanding of creative placemaking and what that looks like and how it looks and how it's making a difference in Sanford. Norton?
Well, hello, and thank you to everybody. First, let me thank Marty and Mike for sharing their story. I think what's important is for people to get an opportunity to hear from people that are doing things to get an idea of what they can do. So Marty and Mike, thank you. Let me also start to thank ICMA, ArtPlace, and Civic Arts for coming together and putting something together that I think city managers and county managers could really appreciate. When you think about art, you don't always think about city governments. I had the pleasure when I started my career, I started in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and right outside of City Hall was a great gold, red colder. And that's how I got to start to know about city and arts. And when I became involved with the art making, the creative placemaking, I didn't even know what that term was. And so I got to be familiar with it, and I said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As I was saying, in Grand Rapids, where the big Calder was right outside the city hall and the county administration building, the city adopted it and used it as a symbol and had it on the city vehicles and on the garbage trucks and police cars. When I came to Sanford, we established a public art commission, and they were very active in putting things together to be community engaged. A project that they just undertook was to wrap our utility boxes with various art, and that's something that's going to be going out throughout the entire city. And they put out a call to local artists to come and submit some drafts of some ideas, and so that's something we're very proud of. We also very recently had a butterfly themed mural contest where there's about 50 murals throughout the city that artists have put up. And if you drive around, particularly on the weekends, you'll see residents and visitors to the city go up to them and taking pictures of it. And that's really a good city spirit. Our Historic Preservation Commission has an annual calendar where they invite community members to submit photos. And this has also been a great community project. We also have gotten the opportunity when our communications officer went to New York, and they visited the New York City Hall, and they saw that they had murals of city employees. So she came back and said, I think we can do that. And so we went out and got public works and police and utility workers, and they posed, and you see a couple of pictures there. These are now hanging in our city hall. And so as visitors come, they are going to see different kinds of city workers. You also see above there is an example where we had a police officer responding to a call, but the police chief has been very, very into community engagement. And when the officer saw some young ladies dancing, she said, I think I can join them. So she went, got out the police car, and you see the picture of her dancing. And that even made the TV news, where they interviewed the officer and they had pictures of her. Her partner took a photo. They actually used the police car radio to have some music, and they just had a great time. You also see there a picture of our community van, where we're making sure to get out into the public with the police to engage in the relationship between the police department and our community members. And part of that is because we had a tragedy in Sanford. It was the shooting of Trayvon Martin in 2012. That made us be very, very conscious about having good community police relations. Recently, we had an individual come and say that they wanted to paint Black Lives Matter on the street right in front of the police headquarters. That was something that was rather controversial, and so we formed a community of residents to say, what can we do as a city to say we are sensitive to what's happening around the country? We want to show that Sanford is looking to be engaged in unity, engaged in equity, and looking to be an inclusive community. And so the committee got together and they started, well, rather than paint Black Lives Matter on the street, what if we had murals throughout the city and different artwork that shows the inclusivity of the city? And that is where we have asked the Art Commission to take a look at that. And the City Commission is saying, yes, we want to make sure that we are publicly saying that we're inclusive, but rather than just a couple of ideas, why don't we go out to the community and get ideas, and that we can then put up and show people that we're doing that. So those are just some of the examples of the art where I see art being important in the city, in the community. We have, as you heard from Mike about the city, about City Hall being a place for art. And that's something that we're also looking at doing. We have art in our city commission chambers. We have art in our city lobby. As I said, those are just some of the examples, but really appreciate the opportunity to be involved in the project, and want to stress again to the city managers and county managers to take a look at the guide and see how they can bring art to their community so that it is alive and engaging of the residents of the community. So thank you.
Norton, thank you for sharing those examples and for being willing to be part of this learning journey over the last year. We did not expect all of the hurdles along the way. I don't think anybody did, but hopefully hearing some of the positive things art and culture have contributed in Sanford helps all of us focus on what's possible heading into this next year. Now we want to transition to giving you a quick tour of the guide, and I'm going to let Laura take over and give you a sneak peek of what it is we are talking about. Laura?
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. So this is really going to be emphasis on quick, because I know we have a couple more people behind me who have some really important resources to highlight for you. So apologies for going fast, but obviously you have all the time in the world to explore the guide at your leisure. So just to lay this out up front, when we originally were sort of received this charge from ArtPlace to put this project together, we kind of thought about it as part white paper and part roadmap or guide. We talked about this notion of a wayfinding guide. So we wanted to first help people with understanding different ways to think about where are you trying to. Artists and culture bearers can help break through those impasses or forge a new path around hurdles. Each one has a beautiful original illustration by an artist named Noah McMillan to go along with it. So hopefully before we close, we'll be able to give you a sneak peek at those. I also want to note that as one of our project advisors, who I believe is on the call today, Ben Stone from Smart Growth America put it at one point, it's really about managers being open to including artists as part of your team, working to solve problems. So the guide helps you think about different roles that artists and culture bearers can actually play in facilitating processes and not just making a thing. So we point out how the unique talents of artists and culture bearers can be really helpful across, honestly, the entirety of local government's areas of responsibility, even in more technical fields like transportation or public works, or around these really urgent priorities like crisis or emergency management. We also know that our audience loves a playbook, so you get a little bit of that here too. We have a section of the guide that we call Navigating Processes. So that really guides you through 4 key phases of creative placemaking partnerships: defining the opportunity, getting ready to partner, assembling the team, and then structuring and sustaining these partnerships, including how to budget and fund them. And more on that in a few minutes. But throughout the guide, and especially this section, you're going to find lots of links and icons that sort of break it up and alert you to existing tools and resources that can help you implement these concepts and also avoid potential pitfalls and hazards. There's additional examples that you can take virtual tours of, and lots of series of guiding questions that help you take these concepts and think about how to apply them to your own community. There are testimonials and anecdotes throughout the guide, but the final section also includes case studies that go a little bit deeper, but case studies that really embody this idea of finding new approaches to familiar problems, and they illustrate the guide's processes in action. So as you spend time with it, you'll hopefully see how the different elements of the guide reinforce each other. You certainly don't need to read it cover to cover. You can jump around. You can use key phrases or icons to search and get closer to what you're looking for. And to encourage you to not be overwhelmed by the breadth of information in there, I've also included a sort of complimentary top 10 list of relatively simple things that you can do yourself or with your staff to begin to seed this really mindset in your organization. So I went faster than I went fast, and I think at this point what we'll do is we will turn it over to 2 more colleagues who are going to talk about additional ways to take the ideas forward. If it's not too distracting, I'll try to, it looks like Lindsay's joining back on. I know they have a couple of slides with pointers to reference points about what they're going to highlight. And then in the time remaining, we'll give you a quick visual tour of some of these key sections of the guide. So thanks for hanging in there. And at this point, I will first recognize Jen Hughes, who's the Director of Design and Creative Placemaking at the National Endowment for the Arts. So Jen, thank you so much for being here, and I will hand it to you.
Great, thanks Laura. Thanks to everyone. It's really a pleasure to be with you all here today. And I just wanted to introduce myself, introduce the work of the National Endowment for the Arts so that you have a go-to place to pursue funding. As you're starting to think creatively about ways that you can really embed arts and culture in the work that you're doing locally, we want you to be well aware that there is funding and resources available for you to prototype some of those ideas. So as Laura mentioned, I oversee the design and creative placemaking programs at the National Endowment for the Arts. We are a federal funding agency, small but mighty. And the program Our Town is our creative placemaking program that explicitly funds arts, culture, and design activities that are really intended to advance community development outcomes. And I think that this guide that ICMA has put together with the support of ArtPlace and Civic Arts is really incredible and really lays the groundwork as to how you might begin thinking about a project that might be eligible for funding in the Our Town program category. So a couple quick facts, just to put it on your radar. We offer annual funding deadline of August for creative placemaking projects. And your leadership is of the utmost importance because we require a partnership between local government or a federally recognized tribal government and at least one nonprofit 501c3 organization. The grants that we give out in this program range between $25,000 and $150,000 in awards for a 1 to 2 year project period. As I mentioned, partnership is critical. So the ways in which you can really embed some of these ideas in practice over the long term in the ways that you're working on the municipal level is particularly exciting. And it's really what we're looking to fund. So you can think of this as a pilot to test out some ideas and sort of build new relationships in community and really bringing arts, culture, and design into the fold of the work that you're doing. So I'm just going to point you to a couple things because, I would love to be in touch with anybody that's really interested in this program. Would love to share out the grant guidelines. We'll be looking with ICMA when we relaunch those guidelines, likely in May. But this work really takes a lot of partnership, a lot of time for planning. So we wanted to put this on your radar as you're thinking to the future. So first, I just want to draw your attention to arts.gov website. We have lots of great case studies, more information about the Our Town program up there on our website. You can reach out to us at any time, included our contact information, ot@arts.gov. And we also put out a monthly newsletter so you can keep on your radar those grant guidelines. But it's really exciting, and I have to echo Marty's enthusiasm to be with all of you today, to be talking about this really incredible and transformational work. So I just wanted to thank you for inviting me here today, and I hope to hear from many of you as you begin to think about ways that you want to prototype this way of working in your community. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen, and sorry for dropping off there. I'm sure Laura took really good care of you while I was getting back online. Finally, we would like to recognize the last of the 4 L's that have been behind this project. Lynn Osgood, the Director of Civic Arts, take it away.
Thank you, Lindsay. And thank you to Lindsay, Laura, and Liz, our team of L's. It's been an incredible journey over this last year, and it's really been both a pleasure and an honor to work with you all and all the advisors that have been part of this project. So to help send everyone off into the world of creative placemaking, I wanted to help end by letting folks know that if this work interests you, that there are indeed ways to connect with other folks working in local government who are embarking on these same kinds of projects. And we've listed here some of the first places that you'll want to start. And I'm actually going to put these into the chat as well, so you have the links. One of the first places you want to go to is the American Planning Association, the Arts and Planning Interest Group. This is available to anyone. You don't have to be a member of APA, and there's a listserv, and they're really building up their capacity for creating connections among practitioners. There's also the Artist in Residence newsletter by Joy and Justice and Joy, a wonderful nonprofit organization that looks very carefully and closely specifically at the idea of artists being embedded within city departments, much as Marty was, and which is a burgeoning practice all over the United States right now. Additionally, with ourselves, Civic Arts, and our partners ELGL, Engaging Local Government Leaders, we're offering trainings for local government staff in creative placemaking and a free monthly online gathering where we'll be highlighting resources such as the ICMA guide, have people share stories, and have an open space for folks to ask questions on creative placemaking projects. And as you dive into the nitty gritty of everything, because what's wonderful about creative placemaking is that every project is different. And so as you dive into the specifics of projects, there are additional places you can go for ideas and inspiration. And on the Civic Arts website, you'll find a resource library that's organized by project stage so that you can more easily sift through some of the best resources on creative placemaking and find what you need. So, and with that, I will pass it back to Lindsay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Lynn, so much. Since I deprived you of seeing a couple pictures of the guide, I'd like to give you a chance to see a little bit visually of what you missed. So Laura will take us back just to give you kind of an idea of what it looks like on the inside and hopefully get you excited.
Okay, so I'll do it even faster this time. So got your outline of what it is. I did want to make sure we gave you a quick peek of Noah's illustrations. They're really lovely. No, it's not moving. I talked about the discussion about different roles for artists on your team. This is a picture of some of the icons you can use to navigate through the guide and find different pieces that are more relevant, whether you want to go deeper, whether you want an actual tool that asks yourself questions, or the virtual tours of projects. And then these are the covers of the more in-depth case studies, and the one in the top right features a lot more about Mike and Marty's work together, as well as some other projects. A lot of these have other projects even beyond just the featured community that show complementary efforts on problem solving on similar themes. So, and then you can look for that, as I said, top 10 list for easy next steps for taking this work forward. So thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you for your patience, y'all. So we've come out with this guide, we've had this webinar, but the conversation does not end here with ICMA. So we'll be continuing and putting more out in the winter and spring. Please go to this landing page often to find some additional resources, links to partners. We'll also be brainstorming ways to help you and your peers learn more about this guide and expand its use. We'd love to continue to hear about your questions, your ideas, so please reach out to me, Laura, any of the panelists. I'm sure would be happy to connect with you, to each other, most importantly, possibly through ICMA Connect, start discussions there, but we really, really encourage you to start talking to each other about what this may look like in your community and how it may help you tackle some of the problems or opportunities that you're facing. Just one more time, we promised we'd get you out of here within the hour, so we've got 3 minutes to spare, but I just want to spend a second to thank everyone that has contributed to this project, and to all of you for joining us today and showing interest in this topic that I think can really shape the future of our communities. So we look forward to connecting with you all again in the future. Thank you, panelists, and you all have a great rest of your day.